Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here, and thank you for your very warm welcome. It's always interesting to return home to New Zealand. We had lived for 6 years in Zambia when our boys were young, and the last 4 years have been spent in South Africa as, if you like, the CEO of the Salvation Army for the southern 5 countries of Africa. You know, when you come back to New Zealand, it's a really wonderful place. I hope you realise that. You know, as you drive around with relatively polite drivers in Wellington, you know, the cleanliness, the beauty, the friendliness of people. This is a wonderful place to live. The freedom we have. Arriving home no longer involves an electric 3-metre high fence with razor wire on the top and an armed guard at the gate, and 3 gates to get through before you get to your front door to unlock, and not being able to walk anywhere with your wallet in your pocket or your phone in your hand. New Zealand is a wonderful place. I have to be honest, and please, this is our little friendly Kiwi way. At the moment, Janine and I are calling Wellington Legoland, you know, because we have come from 12 million people in Johannesburg with 6 lanes on either side of the motorway, going at breakneck speed. It feels quite small, but really lovely in its smallness. It was very interesting to work in South Africa. One of the biggest challenges I had was levels of trust. You know, there are many assumptions you make as New Zealanders. We basically trust each other. And you run your business and you run your organisation from that perspective. And New Zealand's always ranked 1, 2 or 3 in the, you know, anti-corruption stakes. And working in a country that varies between 80th place and 120th place really raises some challenges for you. I noticed today that the transparency report came out, and it confirmed our position as being the leaders in the world in that way. And for us, that's normal. That's how we respect each other. That's how we, you know, treat. That's a cultural norm for us, but actually is something that we should widely celebrate. You know, as a New Zealand Salvation Army officer, I could never afford to go to see the All Blacks. But somehow in South Africa it was cheaper. In the 4 years we were in Johannesburg, there were 3 All Black Springbok tests. One at FNB Stadium, which is the largest crowd that has ever watched an All Black, or a live game of rugby, and we were there. We had one New Zealand flag, and of the 93,000 people in the stands, I could count 16 others. That prepared us for the next game, which was also won by the All Blacks, of course, and we went out with heads high and flags high and receiving what we call the Great South African Silence. Ignore it and it might go away. But then just a few weeks ago, that magnificent test match at Ellis Park, I was there. And when the All Blacks scored the winning try, as a Christian, I received my first baptism with beer. It came by the bucket load from somewhere behind me in the crowd. But I thought if the mighty All Blacks could play like that, I'll stand there dripping wet in beer as a Salvation Army officer with a smile on my face. In 1895, when telegrams were just sort of beginning and very expensive around the world, the Salvation Army was in its sort of beginning growth, and it had reached out to a few countries around the world, but was still quite a fledgling organisation and certainly nowhere near as financial as it might be today. And William Booth, our founder, wanted to send out a Christmas message to the worldwide Salvation Army in the few countries it was in. And when he calculated the cost of telegrams, and he had to decide that in the end all he could do was send one word. And so the one word he sent out to the Salvation Army world in those days, in 1895, the telegram simply said, others. And that's been quite a flagship for us as the years have gone on. In 1992, Janine and I were appointed to Chikankata Secondary School, rural southern province of Zambia, the poorest province in the 12th poorest country of the world. And from my very secluded life in New Zealand, I was dropped in what felt like another planet and asked to perform. 750 boarding students at a secondary school. Occasionally, I would look to the sky and see the vapour trail of a jet go across, and I'd think, okay, the rest of the world does still exist. Things are still, there were no telephones, there were no emails in those days, there was nothing, there was seldom electricity, and off we went. It was quite a struggle. In those days in Zambia, you couldn't buy bread, you seldom could buy rice. If you couldn't grow it, you couldn't eat it, and I really wasn't much of a gardener. About 6 months in, our second son, who was 5 years of age, he said to me, Dad, when are we going home? And I said, well, Chris, that we live our lives at the beck and call of leaders of the Salvation Army. They simply say, go there, and we go. And he said, that's not good enough answer, Dad. When are we going home? And I said, well, Chris, we're going to go home when we've learnt something from the people of Zambia into our lives, and we've given everything we've got that we can contribute to theirs. With his lisp, he said back, I've learnt enough, and I've given heaps, let's go home. When he came to visit us 2 Christmases ago in South Africa, he said, Dad, there's one condition on us coming to have Christmas with you. I said, what's that, Chris? And he said, please drive me home to Zambia. Yeah, that's a 24-hour drive. But so much had that country impacted him and our other 2 sons as children that they really do consider it one of their homes on earth. Of course, South Africa today is facing the tragic loss, really, of the person who taught them what the word others means, Nelson Mandela. And that's going to be the beginning, once they go through that period of mourning, of some challenging days for South Africa. They've still got a long way to go from those days of apartheid. We've lived there. We've come in with different eyes than maybe if you're South African here, you might look at it. Obviously, we might look at it a bit differently. But there's a long, long, long way to go in terms of understanding of ethnicities, of the colours of the rainbow of South Africa coming a little bit closer together. And Nelson Mandela, or Madiba as we call him, his passing will be a struggle, and we need to support that country in every way that we can as they go ahead. Others at this time of the year, I remember from Timaru North Rotary Club when I was a member there, all the work that we did in terms of youth development, and I want to really applaud you for that work as Rotarians. The exchanges and the leadership development programs are just fantastic contributions to this society, and I really congratulate you on that. I also noticed that your slogan for this club is influence for good, and that's all about others. because it's for the good of society as a whole, and the upliftment, particularly of those who find it more difficult in our setting. Today, of course, driving in, listening on the radio, we discover 165,000 children in New Zealand living in poverty. And together we have a responsibility about that. One of the things I've loved about 10 years in Africa is learning to think more as a community than as an individual. And, you know, that is our problem. Where 60%, where they're living, 165,000 children are living at less than 60% of the median house income. So others. I mean, the Salvation Army has an incredible profile in New Zealand, which we treasure and value. There's probably not much I can tell you about what we do. It's very interesting coming back as a Kiwi and being asked to lead this organisation at this time. It's only ever happened 4 times before. And in our 135-year history, I'm only the 5th Kiwi to lead it. And I consider that a huge honour. And we really want to strive to address that issue of others in 2 ways, as we've done in the past. Advocate at the highest level for policies that will assist those who are vulnerable and marginalised in our community. And whilst doing that, serve those same people so that we keep our feet on the ground, we know what to advocate for, and we can not just be the talk about it, but also part of the solution. Of course, over decades, Rotary and the Salvation Army have partnered in that. And we want to say a very, very warm thank you to you. Others, from the Christian and biblical perspective, it's that time of the year when Christians celebrate the coming of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, to restore the broken relationship between God and humanity. The wise men came and gave gifts. And as we, as members of society, individuals, businesses, Rotary, the Salvation Army, we give to those who are less fortunate than we are. You would not belong to Rotary unless you were focused on others and had a giving spirit. So I simply want to say to you today, on behalf of the marginalised, the vulnerable, the excluded, who we serve on your behalf many times, we want to say a very Merry Christmas. Thank you very much. God bless you.